Okay. Um, so, yeah, we'll ask you to introduce yourselves both briefly. Please state the district that you're running for. Whoever goes first, describe the geographic boundaries of the district roughly. Please state your age as of October 14th, which is when we publish this issue, and please tell us your party affiliation as well. And then we'll have some questions about your candidacy and your policy positions and so on. So let's first start with a brief intro. And James, since we made you wait the longest, why don't you go first, please?
Good thing. Yeah, James Ball, running for House District 36. I'm a native Oregonian. I was born in Portland, moved to Bend when I was 7, grew up there, graduated from high school. I got a bachelor's degree in math and computer science from Corbin University in Salem. After I graduated, I joined the Army. I deployed twice to Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division before getting tired of that and coming back to Oregon. After I came back to Oregon, I got my MBA at the University of Oregon. I joined the Oregon National Guard, deployed a 3rd time to Afghanistan with the Oregon National Guard. After that, I went to work for Intel as a financial analyst for 4.5 years. And then I decided I wanted to run for office. And so I left Intel and started a small garage door business, which has been going on for about a year now. And so the district is, like I said, House District 36. It goes roughly from Burnside Street down to Multnomah Boulevard on the north and south end, and roughly from the Willamette River out to the edge of Multnomah County.
Okay.
35 years old.
35 years old. Just a matter of interest, why did you, what has compelled you to want to run for office?
Yeah, so Mark and I talked about this, but I've been a Republican since I've been able to vote. Just a limited government, good governance, individual liberty. Those have been kind of the things that I have been my values when it comes politically. But I was just a voter. I didn't get really involved. It wasn't until 2016 when my party elected Donald Trump as president that I really was frustrated and angry that of all the good candidates that this is the guy we picked, this demagogue. And so I decided I had a choice. I could either disengage from politics, or I could change my party, or I could try to make a positive change. And so the first thing I did was get involved with the Multnomah County Republican Party. And one thing led to another. This seat became vacant when Jennifer Williamson stepped down, and decided that this is the next step in me and my path to provide a moderate, rational voice to the Republican Party as a candidate.
Okay. Your business, the garage door business, I know we had a candidate a few years ago who was a garage door guy. Is this a franchise operation, or is this something you started from scratch?
Well, it is a franchise, but I did start it from scratch. So I purchased a franchise, and I have all the backbone, I guess, of a franchise, but there was nothing here before I started it.
How's it going so far?
Well, the first 6 months of any new business is going to be tough. And we started in October of last year and hit COVID right at that 6-month mark. So it's been a struggle, but this summer has been really good. And I think this fall is also going to be really good. So we're on a good track.
Good. Okay. Dr. Reynolds, let's hear from you, please.
Great. Please call me Lisa. I'm Lisa Reynolds. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running as a Democrat in Oregon House District 36. And I am 56 years old and will be so on October 14th. I'm a mom, an activist, and a pediatrician. And my over 20 years of working with families in the exam room has been a really rewarding career. I love it. But I've been feeling for a while that I want to do more for families than what I can accomplish in the exam room. And then I cut my activism teeth with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, where I help kind of recruit and train hundreds of volunteers to come to Salem to have their voice be heard and to shape policy that saves lives from gun violence. And then after Trump was elected, I helped co-found Indivisible Oregon, which is a grassroots organization working to thwart the Trump agenda. all that culminated, and about a year ago, it was last October, I decided to run for office when the seat became open, never dreaming how this race would be shaped by the worst pandemic in over 100 years. And in that, as that pandemic was unfurling, I would say in March, I used my physician knowledge and my physician training to really help speak out on policy on COVID, as well as to teach my constituents and my patients about what this means for us, what we can be doing, and what we can expect going forward. So, the one other reason I felt it was important for me to be in the legislature is there are very few medical experts in the legislature, and at least last year, 27% of our budget went to healthcare. I suspect that percentage is going to go up. And so I think we do need medical experts in the legislature. So now more than ever, I feel like this time was made for someone like me. So that's why I'm running.
So what specifically, a lot of people go to Salem with high ideals and a burning desire to do something, and they find out that it's kind of a morass or a swamp, even to use one of Trump's terms. What specifically would you like to accomplish, and what makes you think you can accomplish it?
Well, I think, yeah, I may be naive to the morass, but I certainly have very high ideals right now, which I plan to keep. I'm gonna stay practicing medicine while I'm doing it, which keeps me very grounded as to what is working and not working for Oregon families. I think I would like to see a stronger emphasis on early childhood services. I think that's something that our state is still struggling with. Childcare is still a real problem for many families. And preschool is still too expensive for many families. And those dollars spent in those first 2,000 days of life, those pre-kindergarten years, is money so well spent. As we improve kindergarten readiness, we then improve third grade reading scores, which we know improves high school graduation rates, which increases the chance for someone to have a family wage job and meaningful work. So I think I'm going to really try to move the conversation toward early childhood.
So there is a universal universal preschool measure on the Multnomah County ballot. Do you support it?
I do support that, 100%, yes.
So if it passes in Multnomah County, what chance is there of passing it statewide once you've already got all the D votes in the most affluent county in the state? I mean, it seems like there's an element of selfishness here. We're gonna pass possibly this measure for ourselves, basically deflating any kind of an effort to do this statewide. Is that a good idea?
Great question. I mean, another thing that really concerns me, another reason I'm running, is the inequities in our systems, in our education systems, in our healthcare systems. And sure, this is concerning that it's just going to be the urban area here where we have universal pre-K. I think, we know that East County is a part of the urban area that probably is an area that suffers from inequity. And I think this universal preschool will help smooth that out a little bit. But I think it's absolutely something we need to think about statewide.
James, I want to ask you, I noticed on your website that you've got concerns about the potential for tolling various interstate highways in Oregon. The Republicans are a party that really believe in markets. I'm curious if you could walk us through your thinking as to why you don't think tolling is a good idea.
Sure. So, I mean, I probably should have updated that. That was written pre-COVID, and so the things that mattered back then seem to matter a little bit less now. But essentially, the roads that they're talking about have already been built. They've already been paid for by the taxpayers, and I just don't think it's more of just a fairness issue. That I don't think that it's fair to tax people again for things that the taxpayers have already paid for. I honestly think a gas tax is probably a better way to maintain those roads than a toll.
Okay. One of the things that we look for in candidates is independence. And on your website, you illustrated a number of things in areas in which you seem to deviate from some Republicans or the Republican Party orthodoxy. But I'd like you to pick one and tell us about your independent thought.
Yeah, well, probably the biggest one is my not lack of support for Donald Trump. I mentioned that before. That was the catalyst for getting involved in politics. It's just the frustration with the demagoguery and the populism that he brings to the party. Again, I had a choice of either switching my party or trying to change this one, and so I am not a Democrat. I believe in, I've looked at their platform, I've looked at the Republican platform, and probably 70-30, I agree with the Republican platform, and 30-70 on the Democratic platform. So I'm not a Trump guy. I am trying to move the party in a direction back toward our more Reagan-esque principles of limited government and um, individual liberty, good governance.
So you're going to vote for Biden?
Honestly, I'm probably going to vote third party. Biden was a strong candidate until I watched the debate and where he didn't answer the question about whether or not he'd pack the Supreme Court. I think that I'd have to think about that a little bit more, but that is very concerning to me, that the idea of adding more justices to the Supreme Court. So I definitely am not voting for Trump. Whether it's Biden or third party is still making up my mind.
Got it. Lisa, same question for you. Where in your platform or where in your thinking do you deviate from Democratic Party orthodoxy?
That's a tough one. I think, certainly the shared values are really clear to me on, you know, making sure we have a super strong safety net, rock solid preserving a woman's right to have reproductive control over her body. Um, I guess one thing I might say in Oregon, one thing I'm not seeing from the Democrats in Oregon that I'm feeling a little frustrated with is maybe not holding some of the agencies more accountable. And if stuff is happening behind the scenes, great. But as a citizen, as a taxpayer, I'm continue to be really frustrated with our difficulty in getting unemployment benefits to our suffer, the struggling Oregonians. I continue to have concerns about how the OHA is managing COVID. I think the Oregon Department of Education should have called for summer school this year. I mean, some school in the spring was a disaster, bar none, except for some of the private schools. I think things seem to be going a little bit better this fall, but I would like to hold our agencies more accountable. And I think we have a lot of places where things are not going well. And I worry that there's a little bit of this cone of silence around it. And
Why do you think there's a cone of silence around agency performance?
perhaps it is politics. We are the Democrats. We are in control. We control the House, the Senate, the governor's office. Should we not be kind of critiquing the people who are ostensibly on the same side of the aisle as we are? That's one thing I'm thinking.
As a pediatrician, I imagine you've probably had a fair amount of experience with DHS, or is that incorrect?
I've had some experience. I have had some experience, absolutely. Fortunately, not tons. I mean, most families are pretty amazing and doing well. Most parents are get the help they need to take the best care of their kids. But yes, I have interacted with DHS.
And what's your observation of that agency?
One thing I would say is when there's clear-cut danger to a child, I do think they move in and figure out how to get that child to safety. One thing that I think DHS can do better on is preventative care. I have definitely had situations where I have seen, a mom, headed for some real difficulties in her life or in her ability to parent to the best of her ability. Um, and I called DHS. I'm like, what can we do for this mom? They're like, well, we can try some home nursing. It just didn't feel like there was some solid program to support this mom, as she's heading towards something that seemed like it was going to not go well for those kids. So I think we need more preventive programs. I think this goes back to my early childhood services emphasis.
In your primary, you were able to best opponents who represented two of the major public employee unions. Have you gotten endorsements from those public employee unions in the general?
I have. I
Okay.
have, yes.
Have you mended fences with them, or do you think they didn't actually needed mending in the first place?
Um, you know, people all said, primaries are really brutal, and mine certainly was. I would say for the most part, yeah, we've mended fences. And again, I think we share a lot of values. I will say I'm less beholden to them than my primary opponents were. So, but I think we are. I'm working together with UFCW and with ASME on issues around COVID and worker protections. So
Who's
yes,
your largest financial supporter,
I think the Oregon Nurses Association.
and what do they want from you?
I think at this point we are working together on figuring out how to improve workplace safety. And I know there's also been discussion around if, let's say, a nurse comes down with COVID. It sounds like a lot of the hospitals are saying, "Hey, you can't prove you got it here,
Right, right.
so
They
we
want
don't."
they
Yeah,
want presumptive coverage.
presumptive coverage. Thank you. I think
Do you
that's.
favor presumptive coverage for frontline workers?
I would say for nurses, I will say when I saw the Pacific seafood outbreak in Clatsop County. 77 workers were reported positive last week. Clatsop County is a county that has very low masking requirements. No, I'm sorry, very low masking adoption.
Uh-huh.
And my friends who live out there would say that a lot of those people are probably positive because they walk around not wearing masks. So I think it's a little bit tricky, and I'm not sure I'm ready to say that for every workplace.
Okay. James, who's your largest supporter?
A private individual named Manny Stefanovic.
Why is Manny supporting you?
He's a friend.
Yeah.
He
Oh.
likes what I'm trying to do. I didn't get any big dollar donations from PACs or anyone.
So on paper, you've got a very impressive resume with your military service, your background, your time at Intel. Now you're an entrepreneur. You're exactly the kind of candidate that, I think the Republican Party would probably like to be recruiting. Why haven't people gotten behind you?
I think for this, the the registration disadvantage in this particular district is one of the reasons why it's been hard to get some of that big money. Talk to Mark, it's about 55% Democrat, about 35% non-affiliated, and about 10% Republican. So this seat's been held by a Democrat for 30 years. The last Republican to run was in 2012 and got 17% of the vote. So I think a lot of them see this as sort of a losing battle, and so they haven't been able to give to me financially.
So you're a young candidate. What's your long-term game plan other than trying to switch the registration in your district? You're going to move? You're going to give up on politics? What are you going to do?
Well, it depends on how this goes. And actually, Lisa and I talked about this. I can tell you my strategy. I would love to get 30 or 35% because that would mean that because I'm running as a moderate. I'm running as a moderate Republican, and so much of the Oregon Republican Party and the Multnomah County Republican Party are very Trump-centric, fairly extreme. A lot of them are, and one of the narratives going around the Republican Party is that the reason, for instance, the reason Newt Bueller didn't win for governor is because he tried to pander to the middle and he lost the hardcore Republicans. And so if we nominate a true Republican, we can win statewide. We can win some of these things. So it's sort of a proof of concept. If I can double what I'm supposed to get from based on the registration, I can say, hey, I ran as a moderate. I'm running ads right now, basically saying I'm not a Trump person. It's in my voters pamphlet statement. So if I can convince the rest of the party that this is a winning strategy of get away from the demagoguery and the kind of the Trump mentality, it gives me a platform to try to make change in the future.
Yeah. So if you were to be elected, what is the issue that you're burning to go to Salem and work on?
So good governance is probably the biggest thing, and I appreciate Lisa holding the different agencies accountable. And I just going back to some of the big ones was the Columbia River crossing, tens of millions of dollars spent and no bridge. Cover Oregon, $500 million spent and no website for the Affordable Care Act. And now the unemployment debacle, where we have systems that haven't been updated since the 70s. And we even received a federal grant for $9 million to upgrade those systems back in, I believe, 2006, and just haven't done it. It's just mismanagement of taxpayer money. We can have more money for schools. We can have more money for healthcare. We can have more money for all these things that really matter if we stop wasting it on projects that are just mismanaged and fall apart.
I'm curious what you took away from your 4.5 years at Intel in terms of, I don't know, lessons about management or lessons about how to approach very large and difficult problems.
Sure. One piece at a time. Mark and I talked about this a little bit before we all joined the correct phone call. But we've got 49 other states to look at. We can look at metrics from other states. We can look at budgets from those other states. We can look at how they're managing their programs and use that as a measuring stick to see how we're doing and how we can improve. So in education, where Oregon is in the top 50% of spending per pupil, and we are near the bottom when it comes to high school graduation rate. That's just a kind of overly simplified example, but a place where I believe the money is there. I don't believe we need to tax more to get more money to the schools. I think we just need to reallocate the money to better serve the students.
We have a number of statewide ballot measures and local ballot measures. In fact, in Multnomah County, I think the largest concentration of new money measures, including, and also one Portland Public Schools measure, which is a renewal measure. I want to ask each of you if you were going to vote no on one of the local money measures, those being parks, library, metro transportation, universal preschool, and Portland Public Schools, which would you vote no on and why? And I'm going to make this a difficult question for you, Lisa. You must choose one to vote no on, even if you're not actually going to vote no on. So that's the concept here is you must vote no and tell me why. Mark, you're raising your hand in frustration.
Well, I think your question is which of the money measures is Lisa least supportive of?
That is a better way to frame the question. Thank you.
Am I going first?
Yes, please.
First, I do just want to thank James for running, and I think we should have contested elections every single time. So, and the fact that no one's run as a Republican in 8 years, I think is a shame. So, I told James that when we met in person. Wow, I'll be honest, I have not studied these measures that well. I cannot say no to schools and libraries and parks. Transportation's very, very important, but my understanding is that measure right now is a little bit the most fraught, both in terms of the dollars it's choosing to raise and what this means during an economic downturn. I absolutely think we need to be future looking on transportation. Obviously, many of us are not using public transportation these days because of COVID, but it's incredibly important for our future to smooth out inequities, to improve our climate. But I have to admit, I'm not super prepared for this question, but that might be the one that I would want to take a second look at.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. Same question for you.
Well, it's a bit easier for me, but it'd be the same one. The metro tax. It may have made more sense before COVID, but to Lisa's point, people are not taking transit right now because they don't want to be that close to people. The second thing is more long-term. We don't know what transportation is going to look like post-COVID. If we have people who are working from home now who are going to continue working from home, maybe that isn't as necessary. The other thing that is coming up in the next 5 to 10 years is the rise of autonomous vehicles. So you're going to have a of autonomous vehicles, essentially Uber and Lyft, driving around without a driver. So they're going to be dirt cheap. They're all going to be electric. So it's going to be good for the environment. I think that this is poor timing for a giant transportation measure like that, just because we simply don't know what's going on. The COVID effects, the long-term effects of working from home, and then of course the autonomous vehicles that are just around the corner. So that would be my no vote.
I'd like to offer you each an opportunity to ask your opponent a question. James, you first, if you'd like to ask Lisa anything, ideally something that will illuminate a part of her platform and tell us something about both of you.
Sure. So we are doing this to try to get the endorsement from Willamette Week. You have a lot of endorsements from a lot of different people. How will this endorsement help you in a way that your other endorsements haven't?
Thanks for that question. Well, I certainly know Willamette Week is a respected newspaper in our community, and so by getting the endorsement by Willamette Week, it's a seal of approval from, I think, discerning journalists. I don't mean to be like I'm buttering you up, but it's certainly something that I think is important. I know I look at Willamette Week's endorsement list when I sit at my dining room table and fill out my ballots. So I would be, I think it helps validate me as a candidate.
And Lisa, would you like to ask James a question, please?
I would. I like that question about Intel, but I would like to ask you a similar question about your years in the military. That's something I have very little knowledge about, and how that has shaped you, how it's shaped your understanding of policy and governance.
Yeah, so the Army works for the federal government, so it's very much a government job essentially, with the different goals than most government jobs. But I think what I gained from that is, one thing is just maturity, being able to see what I'm capable of and deal with difficulties. And I think that set me up well to, first of all, understand the way that the government works and funding and budgeting, and because it's very different from the private sector, where in the private sector, you have revenue and you have customers, and in the government, you just have your budget. And so you have to manage that, and just kind of seeing things. And this goes back to my good governance point of seeing the waste that goes on in something even like the military, which I think is probably one of the least problematic branches of the federal government as far as waste goes. But just seeing how the mentality of managing a budget and when you don't have to win customers. So me personally, growing up, dealing with something difficult and knowing what I'm capable of, and then also just understanding kind of on the inside of the way the government works. Great,
thank you. Mark, do you have any questions?
I do. Thanks, Nigel. So James, a couple things. One, where are you on the issue of choice?
I am pro-choice.
Okay. So I gather you did not get the right to life endorsement.
No, I didn't even ask for it.
And then I'm just wondering, in one race, so Senator Jeff Merkley has an opponent, Joe Ray Perkins, who's a Republican. Who do you plan to vote for in that race?
So I know Joe Ray personally. I think that it's a bit unfair the way that she's been treated by the media. I think she's got some issues with the QAnon stuff. I think that but then you've got Merkley, who's one of the most left-leaning members of the Senate. So I don't know. I will probably end up voting for Joe Ray again, because I know her personally, and but I don't think she has a chance of winning. I think Merkley's gonna just bulldozer.
Thanks, James. One other question: what were the terms of your departure from Intel?
I quit to start a business. I resigned. I knew that I would. Okay.
Lisa, for you, I know Nigel asked you about political independence, and you answered. I actually had to step away for a minute, but I wanted to ask you about Jennifer Williamson. Obviously, you ran in her district. She left to run for Secretary of State. She dropped out, and then with very little time before filing, Shmaya Fagan stepped in, defeated Mark Haas. I'm being a little bit too crude here, but it seems to me you can draw a line between Democrats who are more independent than others, and the ones who are more independent than others were really troubled by the public employees unions sort of stepping in with a heavy hand and basically wresting away from an otherwise fine Democrat, Mark Haas, the Secretary of State's race. And I'm just wondering where you are on that.
I was bothered by that as well. I know you all reported on State Representative Lisa Kenny Geyer's concern over this, and I would say that I found that concerning. I know in that race that there was a somewhat misleading web page put up that was funded by special interests. And I found those tactics disturbing. I mean, I am, of course, 100% behind Shemia Fagan for Secretary of State, but I didn't like those campaign tactics. There were some not so nice campaign tactics in my own race. There was some nice, not so great campaign tactics in at least one other race for state representative. So
Who did
I
you
find it
support in
troubling.
the primary?
Pardon me?
Who did you support in the primary?
I will say I voted for Jamie McLeod Skinner, and it was in part because of the tactics that I saw, kind of circling behind Shemia Fagan. But I'm 100% behind Shemia Fagan in the general.
Thank
There's
you.
no question she is far superior to Senator Thatcher.
All right, great. Well, we are out of time. We have one question for both of you that we're asking of all candidates this COVID season. What is the most embarrassing, memorable, difficult experience you have had on either a Zoom or a Google Meet call, one of these calls? And if you say it's trying to deal with this idiot Nigel Jacobs who doesn't know how to use Zoom, no points off for that. You will not be penalized for that answer. Lisa, we'll ask you to go first, please.
Well, I think it always comes down to not being muted when you think you are.
So what did you say when you thought you were muted?
I've been singing in some choirs, and you're supposed to mute yourself, especially because of the lag. And there was one time I was kind of rocking out to, actually it was a gospel song, and like to my, the director's like, Lisa, can you mute yourself? It was pretty embarrassing. I don't have a great voice. I'm sure I wasn't on tune, and I was particularly exuberant during that one, so that was hard.
Okay, thank you. James, how about you?
Yeah, so not terribly bad, but probably just not paying attention, and then somebody asks a question and having to ask them repeat it because I was checking email or something, and that's happened a couple times.
All right, great. Well, listen, I'm really sorry. My apologies, both of you, for not having this set up and ready to go at 9 o'clock. I'm sorry for that. Sorry to have wasted some of your time. Thank you both for joining us today. Mark, anything before we let them go?
No, thank you both.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks. See you all later.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.